topic, very, very interesting, very, very relevant. And I am particularly curious about some of the, trends that are taking shape, which have long-term implications. And I've been very curious and intrigued. So we have an amazing panel, and I'm hoping to, get a lot of answers, both for myself as well as for the rest of the audience. So very quickly, if Anindita, Padma, Siddharth, Shruti, if you can just introduce yourselves in less than a minute each, then we can just get cracking.
Sure. Padma, you want to go first?
Sure. I head analytics and data sciences and AI globally for Capgemini. Let's move on. I know we are running late already.
Yes, Padma, you have a hard stop at 6, so I'll ask you all your questions before that. No worry.
Really happy to be here, and fantastic session, Samir. Have been enjoying it. Over to you, Shruti.
Hey, hi, Shruti Jaiswal. I lead talent management and learning for global business services at PepsiCo. Keeping it short. Over to you, Anandita.
Hi, I'm Anindita. I head HR for Dassault Systems, overall 22 years in HR. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I'm part of Genpact, looking after a large relationship for one of our key accounts in Genpact, based out of Bangalore.
Great. Thanks, all of you. I'm Hari, head of HR at Big Basket, so we'll get cracking. So just one question for all of you, which is, the pandemic has changed the way people look at jobs long term. And, we're all seeing some fundamental shifts in the mode of engagement. And, we are all, there's a lot of speculation in terms of what are some trends that are taking shape, what are some trends that are going to be lasting. So I would request each of you, if you can share one pattern that you are seeing, one you think shift that's going to happen and stay with us in the long term. Very quickly, briefly, one very sharp observation or trend that you would like to share.
Let me go first. I don't know whether to call this a trend or whether something that we are looking into the future of this order, or I don't know. Hari, you and I were talking about this a couple of days back as well, right? The gig economy within the whole space of IT and IT services and especially to do with data and AI and etc. that we are in right now. We are seeing a huge. It's no news to everybody. We are already seeing a huge attrition across across various organizations within this industry. And in some form or fashion, they are rotating from one to another also, if you can imagine it that way, right? But where is this all leading to is a question that I have been asking. At what point is it going to stop? At what point is it going to, mature, if I can use that word? And that's the question that I think many of us are pondering with. So the trend definitely is a lot of movement, right? Lot of shift towards digital and data and AI. A lot of people are already experimenting to do things in the form of a gig economy and working for more than one organization, maybe. But interestingly, I was looking at this BCG report, a recent one, where they had predicted, but this is not a very recent one. I would say it's a 6 month backwards one, where they had predicted that how the gig economy is growing, at least 100 million people will be working, and blah blah blah. But the portion of IT and IT services was very minuscule in this whole thing. The question in the mind is this going to change? Is it going to become like people are going to be happy working from wherever they are for multiple folks, etc.? Is that a trend which is already there, or which is shaping up? Is a question that I'm also pondering with, and maybe I will request others also to chime in. But definitely, as I said, more movement, more betterment, more data analytics, more digital, working from wherever they are. So we are going to, different tiered cities, not just the main ones, captive. Bangalore has always been a great one. We are actually going down all the way to, Trichy or even beyond that as well, right? So see if there are, and we are finding very good people working from everywhere, right? So
Great.
that's,
That's
I think
yeah.
it's going to be a mixed one as we move forward, Hari. Just wanted to say
Wonderful. That's wonderful. I think you talked of gig, you talked of doing multiple, roles, employee engage. The engagement models with companies will undergo a big change. Great. Move on to maybe Anindita.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just putting my laptop on charge. Well, so one observation that we have seen in the last 2 years is that there's demand by people for having a hybrid culture. So flexible work environment is something which is now given. So now whenever we do interviews, also this is kind of given. So the source system, as an organization, we do not have a work from home culture. But now when we do the interviews, our mindset also is changing because this is kind of an ask which you can't deny anymore. So it's like hybrid culture is something which is now given. You can't, and this is something probably is going to stay for forever. I don't know.
Great.
Looks like.
So hybrid work culture. Great. Let's move on. Yeah. Siddharth, you would want to share any particular pattern insight that you see?
Yeah, I can tell you for sure that it's going to be very confusing in future. We have this whole habit of creating buzz about interesting words around everything. There were companies who came out and said virtual first company in the
Right.
world, 100% virtual forever. And now, as soon as wave two was over in India, we went back to our old habits of saying, guys, when
Right.
can you come and join us back in offices? So the old habits will die hard. So they'll be quite confusing. I can surely say that HR will have a tough job. I had to manage the situations of what is expected of companies and what is expected of employees too, because things are evolving and it'll get messy before it settles down. That's my view.
Great. Shruti, the last one insight from you, if you have any.
Without repeating what they said. So I fully agree with what everyone said. The only thing I would add is I think this trend is here to stay forever. And number two, I think my key takeaway of all that we're seeing, see, employees are a lot more aware. It's not just because of the demand and supply gap today, but employees have become a lot more aware. We are landing into a forever employee market. And my takeaway is that the talent philosophy has to move beyond attrition and retention.
Right.
You have to think about employee experience and not attrition or retention. That's not a long term strategy anymore. So I'll just pause there.
Wonderful. So I think what we'll do is we'll just explore this entire idea of talent shortage and how real is this talent shortage? What are some of the factors that have resulted in this talent shortage? The Indian economy has been shrinking. Entire industries have been decimated. A few industries have grown, but net the economy is shrinking. And despite that, all of us are witnessing a shortage of talent. So we'll just spend some time understanding how real this is. What are some of the implications? So in some ways, Padma, you are at the center of all this. 5 million, workforce, very well paid. Gave India, the swagger on the world economic stage. IT industry, $200 billion. What are you seeing? Hiring from campuses had always been big time, and suddenly attrition has moved up from 10% per annum to 30% per annum. What is behind all this? Where are they going? Are people leaving the industry? Is there a lot of rotation happening within the industry? And if there is rotation, why is this sudden increase in rotation? And how do you plan to deal with all this?
sure. Well, there is obviously a large part of it being rotation, but let's step back and see why all this is happening, right, Hari? With the COVID, I still remember about, that is 2019, when we started, people started working from home, when we were a little skeptical how the industries were going to move forward. But suddenly we realized that it was all an opportunity for for companies like ours, IT services organization, and every other digital organization or digital first kind of organization, because everybody who was ready to work from wherever they were
Hmm?
started attracting all sorts of revenue, and even the large conglomerates wanted to move online, right? So suddenly the need for everything to become online and digital started, and which meant that there was a huge demand for IT, for applications, for everything that could happen digitally, right? All transactions that could happen digitally, there was a huge demand towards it, and this is all of a sudden, and people were still trying to figure out, still how do you work from home when this boom suddenly happened, right? Now, which meant that we had to get ready. We had to get ready for the boom in revenue, boom in kind of the work that is going to come our way, the great work that was coming towards us, and at the same time find people who can actually scale up. And I
So,
think this
Padma,
was,
are you, I just to add a little bit here, question, interrupt. So, are you seeing an increase on the demand? So is the demand side growing in a big way as a result of which you are trying to hire from other companies and from campuses? So, is the demand going up in a big way?
indeed, Hari, I think cloud, if you're working on cloud, if you're working on digital, if you're working on data, if you're working on analytics, if you're working on AI, you will know that the demand has spiked, right? Everybody now wants to get into one of these or all of these together, right? So that they are able to reach their own ultimate customers and consumers, Hari. Therefore, definitely that is what has been driving for people, and therefore, the whole supply chain of people who will be able to do this and deliver back to the customers. This is what is happening in this industry, at least.
Got it. Padma, I know you have a hard stop at 6. So let me just ask you one more question before you leave.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about the great resignation. Everybody's heard about this. Everybody has a point of view. What is really happening? Can you just tell us, demystify this for us? And is there a parallel in India? What is really happening? Why this sudden change?
Well, I think, Hari, this great resignation is a very a word which has different meanings in different geographies, I would say. From what I've been reading from the New York Times, and what's happening in North America is very different from what is happening in India,
So
right?
just briefly talk about North America and India in these
Correct.
two
I'll
contexts.
just keep to these two geographies. That's what
Yes.
I want to say, right? So North America, it is more to do with people wanting to have the flexibility, people wanting to have, not get stuck with one job at any point in time, people wanting to take over in terms of, how they want to lay their day, right? Whether I want to do it the way I want it, and so on and so forth, right?
And
So
why did
there's
this
a lot of,
sudden need for doing this happen, which is I want control of my life, flexibility? Why didn't this happen before? What changed?
because overnight many of them went out of job, right? The real economy, where they were actually standing outside and working on the various real brick and mortar kind of the world, suddenly came to a standstill, and then they had this opportunity to move out, work digitally, and in which case they could do it at their own pace, they could do it with more than one organization, and so on and so forth. All those flexibility came in all of a sudden, right? So that was primarily the reason why it was happening. It is happening in in the North America region.
Hmm.
Cut India, right? India, now this great resignation and all this is, in my view, happening largely in the IT sector itself, right? Outside of IT sector, it is not so big, right? Now the IT sector boom. When I'm saying IT, I'm
Hmm.
including all of AI, analytics,
Right, right,
etc.
correct.
Right? Now this sector, outside of this sector, there is no great resignation that we are talking about.
Sure.
It is this is primarily led by what I was telling you, Hari, the
Right.
increase in demand for all the organizations to go digital, go online, go cloud, blah blah, right? So that means we needed more people, we needed higher workforce, good workforce, people who knew this, etc. So if you had only a little bit of an experience, and or you want to get into this field, you immediately got a job or you got a hike, and you could just move on. So that is what is the trend. That is, as I said, it is different. You can't combine both the
Great,
worlds. It's a
great.
recognition in that sense.
Wonderful. So, Shruti, if we just move on to you come from Pepsi. So, different industries seem to be grappling with talent at this point of time in different ways. The challenges are very different. So, how are you seeing, the talent challenge in the FMCG sector, particularly at Pepsi? Is there any tectonic shift at all, or is it business as usual for you? Is it easier to get talent now, more difficult? Can you just throw some interesting insights from your industry perspective.
Not a tectonic shift. The only thing I would add is, particularly in the GCC side, the demand is a lot higher because due to pandemic, a lot more work across industries has moved to the GCC. So the demand is higher, which is why there is need to hire more and more at pace. That's one trend that's happening, which may come across as, are we short of talent? It's just that the demand has suddenly taken a surge, getting us to need for creating a need for us to hire faster. In terms of challenges, see, and I don't see this because of what's happening. Our numbers are fairly way below the market when it comes to attrition. Our engagement numbers are good. But when it comes to hiring for niche skills, that's always a challenge. And it's not just a challenge today or pandemic has led to it. This challenge has always stayed with most firms because niche skills are a higher difficult to get in the market. If you get in the market, they're difficult to hire because the demand is way higher for them. And once you get them in, the other challenge is how do you keep them in the organization? Because for niche skill, it's not easy to create a growth path for them
Correct.
in the organization. So those are some of the challenges, but I would not say they're largely because of the pandemic. The, I think the larger focus is how do we adapt to new ways of working in the hybrid setup? What does that look like? How will we make what experience do we want to create for our employees to keep them and keep them happy? It's not just about retaining them and holding talent in the organization. So, yeah.
Great. And startups are hiring in a very big way, especially the well-funded startups. And some numbers that are getting thrown around, especially on the tech side, is that each of these 200 odd Soonicorns and unicorns are, ramping up their tech teams, hiring about 200 engineers, and 200 at least, and there are 200 Soonicorns and 100 engineers is 20,000 engineers, and the quality standards are pretty high. And the demand for this, I mean, supply of these quality engineers are just around 4 to 5,000 in India. So the same number of resources being chased by such a big opportunity. So are you guys seeing any impact on your industry, especially on the technology side and even the non-tech? Because e-commerce companies, whether they're Udan, whether they're Flipkart, they're hiring on the non-tech side, hiring FMCG folks, hiring people who run other traditional businesses as well.
It always does, right? Anything that happens in the startups, because we know startups can always offer a better learning experience to people because of the culture that they come with, the opportunity to create and shape. So that is always, and there's huge plethora of startup, particularly that happened in India, but that does add to the challenge, especially in this context we speak now.
Right. Great. Anindra, just moving to a little bit, what is the kind of work that Dassault does in India? If you can just take a minute to explain that, I'm not sure everybody knows this. And therefore, what's the kind of talents that's relevant for you? What kind of changes you are seeing in terms of availability of this talent? Are you seeing an increase in attrition? I think when we were speaking last, you had some very interesting insights to share. So if you could just go and share some insights.
So yeah, I think my thoughts are very similar to that of Shruti. But let me first start with what the Source System does. It's a 3D experience company. We are mostly into designing software. Some of our products like Katia and all is very very known in the market. Mostly for designing aircrafts, Boeing, Airbuses, and most of the cars that you see are designed using our software. Most of, but that is just one part. We have presence in 12 different industries, and we hire all type of engineers from different teams because we have presence in infrastructure, manufacturing, and life sciences. So this kind of covers various different type of engineers from the industry that we hire. Um, where I was saying that my thoughts are or challenges are, or I'll say very similar to Shruti, is because pandemic has really not much impacted in terms of the attrition for us. So we are
Right.
still at very, very low. We are just at 7% attrition, and we have been like this, I mean, for a very long time. So it has really not made a difference. But the change that we have seen is that the reason for leaving is very different from what used to see in the past. So, in the past, you will see people leaving for better opportunities and all. Now I'm seeing a lot of people are also leaving to become entrepreneurs. So probably the risk-taking ability for people has really increased or improved, because there's a confidence that there's immense opportunity in the market, and you can take a risk, try out something, and then after some time, if you want to come back to the industry, you'll still have opportunity. You'll not have to struggle the way you would have struggled in the past.
So,
So that
Anindya,
has
just
been
to as a
positive.
follow-up to this, I mean, I'm also seeing this trend, which is people quitting jobs and even well-paid jobs to
Mhm.
plunge into entrepreneurship. But those are few in number. Are you seeing this in a much larger scale, or is it just a handful?
It's a handful. See, why since it's a new trend that I'm
Yeah,
seeing. In the past, we would not see people leaving job and
correct,
becoming somebody who's
correct,
designing a face shield, or goes back to agriculture. These
correct.
are, I was really surprised to see these kind of reasons for leaving from people. So that is where you start to ponder, okay, where is this whole thing moving? So that shows that people are ready to take different type of risk and do things that they have always wanted, probably. So this seems to be the right time because you have the confidence that you can come back to corporate.
Wonderful. Just one more follow-up question in the context of remote working.
Mhm.
Have you rethought about the way you manage performance? Have you done anything on that front? Have you brought about any changes? And do you feel it performance needs to be managed very differently in a remote working context?
Actually, in again, it has not really changed due to pandemic for us, because in the past also we had a very robust system. I think that is same for many of the established organizations already, where we have always focused on the what as well as the how. So as long as the how is being quantified and you are moving from really quality kind of performance measurement assessment, then I think it is taken care. So doesn't matter, and especially in our kind of organization, which is a sales organization, is completely number driven. So you have their sales compensation plan and everything related to that. So we really didn't have to do something very very different due to pandemic and due to remote work.
Right, right. Great. So, Siddhartha, moving to you now, many teams have been working remote for the last 2 years. And, in the beginning, we saw a lot of people being completely overwhelmed. And they began coping with it gradually. In the beginning, they were complaining, what, work has intruded into my life and my life has intruded into my work. I don't know the difference. I don't seem to be able to draw a line. But finally, people are coping with it and seem to be even loving it. And if you call them back to work, some of them would say that they're not keen to come back. So, in your view, how have companies been viewing this? What changes have they been making? And how are they going to get people back into their offices? What changed in the last 2 years? Why were they overwhelmed big in the beginning? Why are they now finally loving it? What changes have companies made, individuals made? Also, one more question around data security. People working at home, how have companies been dealing with data security? I'm sure you guys must have faced this problem in a big way, especially when you have agents who are talking to your customers, clients working for them. So, are you seeing any tech solutions to data security problems? A big question, but just you can answer that in any way you want.
Sure. Let me start with the last one quickly. I think in the last 2 years, at least, as we moved on to remote working, managing a client relationship, managing a client infrastructure, which is extremely secure, we were always worried about the trust factor within our own employee base because we've always had a traditional setup of everybody sitting across the floor. And I think the technology has evolved. We moved away from the desktop models to having everybody on laptops because that was the need
Right.
of the hour. And then the infrastructure has actually picked up. At least in my organization, I've seen this happen very often. We haven't seen a lot more cases than we usually used to say. I actually think that people are a lot more responsible because they're working from home, because they know
Yes.
that that's the flexibility now they're getting. I don't think people are coming up to that point now. I know middle of 2020, one, people might have been at a high in terms of enjoying what they're doing. I think there is fatigue, there's burnout, there is a challenges of managing work and life because there is no end date. We used to have shift timings, we still have shift timings, and people would log out. There is no log out now,
Yeah.
and I think that's a huge challenge in the way young people are dealing with this. And I think the companies that will really be successful with their hybrid models will be when they will be creating that purpose which is aligned to the well-being of the employees, and employees will choose companies which will talk about
Right.
that sustained well-being approach, because otherwise you will lose people to others where who will possibly have a better policy around work-life balance. I
Correct.
personally feel excited about it because traditionally my first reaction was when I was hiring for my organization was about I can get more females now, because for them working early
Right.
morning shifts, late night shifts was impossible to get.
Correct.
I can get returning moms who have taken break because they couldn't find anything worthwhile managing
Correct.
small kids. So for me, the talent pool is actually expanded, and that gives me so much of leverage. In otherwise, we would never would have got them.
Wonderful, Siddharth. I mean, very interesting that you answered my first question now. In the beginning, I think when I talked about some, big trend that you have seen or are seeing, you said old habits die hard and companies are pretty much calling back. But everything that you said were amazing insights on what has changed long term. For instance, a lot of women are beginning to re-enter the workforce. Flexibility matters a lot. And you're saying that, companies that don't offer these benefits and insist on people coming back to office won't be able to attract. So all this has changed in a very big way. Great.
Hari,
Yeah,
hey,
sorry.
hi, this is Samir. We've hit time, so could you please wrap up? And
Yeah,
if
yeah.
there are any
Great. I'll do that.
questions, we
We'll
can
do that.
finish in next 2 minutes, please.
So just
Sorry about
quickly,
that.
what we'll do is maybe one last takeaway from everyone, which is that how do you think talent management, attraction, retention has changed? What are what paradigm has changed? If you can be very specific, very sharp in terms of what one big thing has changed, especially for your organization, and you can go beyond your org as well. What one thing has changed for all time to come?
Flexibility, for example, is going to be the norm. And
Right.
flexibility does not mean company rolling out a policy that you can work 2 days from home and 3 days you can come to office, or 3 days from home, and so on. Flexibility means you create. It's based on a guideline where you can create empowerment in your organization, where a manager and employee can talk and figure out what works best. That's the kind of trust and empowerment one needs to create. And I think
Excellent.
that overall, that's an example that leads to the shift in overall how we think about talent philosophy. In my mind, like I was saying earlier, we have to move beyond attrition and retention with
Correct.
workforce, continuous movement. And there's a quote that explains my thinking very well and aligned to that, which is when we talk about employee experience, what we're really saying is treat your employee that they want to stay
Right.
and train them so that they can leave.
Wonderful.
That to me is what the
Lovely.
philosophy needs to evolve to.
Great. Siddharth?
For me, I think the bigger challenge, and I think the learning for future will be how you manage teams in a hybrid model. Like when I remember, we were all remote. It was tough at the beginning, but we managed. But suddenly, when we said hybrid, my management teams were struggling because we had half the team in office, half the team remote, and half of the conversations on the corridors, half the conversation not on the Zoom call. So the new bias that will come into play is people who are in the office versus the people who are not in the office. And I want to make sure the performance management systems and how we engage is fair to both parties.
Wonderful. Great. Terrific. Anindita, your last words.
I think we are going to see a lot of consultants will the trend of having more consultants in the market will definitely
White collar
come.
gig, basically.
Yeah, because since people are looking for flexibility, a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
people, organizations are also now more open to hiring consultants rather than really full-time people for
Great.
many of their specific projects. And people are also ready to take up consultancy roles now.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Siddharth, Shruti, and Anindita for this wonderful discussion. Padma is no longer, she's left. So Great to have had her as well. And back to you, Samir.
Thank you so much, Hari. Despite you having a glitch and without the video, I think the kind of nuggets you bring to the table in terms of eliciting, I would say, better response comes in quite handy. I mean, look at how free flowing Shruti, Anindita, and Sid was, and they were coming up with all those phrases and adages, which is quite relevant because I think what sums up this conversation, because of course, 30 minutes, 35 minutes cannot do a quite adequate justice to this is a very evolving, very fluid situation, and there is no one answer for this entire thing because it's for the first time we've seen that situation emerging, and the whole myths have been busted, but a lot of questions are still to be answered. And at the center of this, the fulcrum of this is the employee. And as you rightly said, Shruti, it's about the experience, it's about the engagement. As Sid said, there is also a challenge of old habits die hard. And as Hari rightly said, look, eventually, I mean, when demands have started exceeding the supply, we got to create a situation where it's a win-win situation, not only for employees but for employees as well. Thank you so much for your time. Absolutely topical, very very contemporary discussion. But really appreciate time and sorry about this glitch and all. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so much,
everyone.
Hari.
Thank you.
Bye.
Console, over to you. We will be making few announcements for the awards. Folks have been waiting. So Console, over to you. Thank you so much, everyone.